In one word, the sermon this morning is about motivation. Something that applies to all of us, of all ages. We all need motivation. It's a necessary part of life. It's required for most things that we do. It is a force, an energy, if you will, that causes us to do things, to act. When we're motivated, we are driven, we accomplish, we succeed, we complete, we persevere. In other words, we just continue to do at our best what we're supposed to be doing. Motivation is directly related to our interest. In our recent meeting, we had some discussions on interest. And there are some good points and good questions and good answers to interest. And that brings us to this lesson. Motivation is directly related to our interest. If you put motivation on one hand and interest on the other, they feed each other. Motivation feeds your interest. You're more interested in that for which you're motivated. At the same time, your interest makes you more motivated as it gets stronger. So it's a mutually supportive, feeding relationship. So it is clear now that this sermon is about that, about motivation. But I ask a question, for what? What are we talking about? Motivated for what? Well, it could be about a lot of things. We could complete our title with a lot of things that would be beneficial. I hope we're motivated to be good parents, to have our home according to God's blueprint, doing our job at work well, and doing whatever we do to be strongly motivated to accomplish our best. But there's one thing that covers everything. It is so comprehensive in its coverage. It includes everything important. And we can talk about this one thing today and apply this to every part of your life. And that, of course, is our discipleship to Christ. Discipleship to Christ includes everything for your personal life. It includes your life at home. It includes your life at work. It includes your life at school. It includes us here as a church. And so motivation for discipleship is the heart and core of our discussion of motivation and interest. So we will have as our text this key passage on discipleship. I encourage you to open your Bible to Matthew, the 16th chapter. We'll not read all of this passage at the beginning of our lesson. We will be reading parts of it as we go and as we continue. But most Bible students will recognize that this is a key passage that records the Lord's teaching on discipleship. In other words, to talk about motivation for discipleship, we could go to different sources. A lot of religious people go to some secular sources. Our source is the Lord himself. What does the Lord say to you to motivate you for discipleship? To me, that is something of utmost importance. This passage begins a section in Matthew. If you would look at verse 21, then came Peter and verse 21. From that time began Jesus to show unto his disciples that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and the third day be raised up. See, that begins the paragraph that starts this teaching. From that time, in other words, Jesus is now in Galilee. He has been in the northern extremity of Galilee near Caesarea Philippi, and now he's going to go to Jerusalem. And he begins to prepare his disciples for his upcoming death. And so from now on in the Gospel of Matthew, most of what's recorded occurs in that great city. But this is a keynote passage on discipleship, and let me suggest, among other things that the Lord teaches in these verses, he teaches what provides motivation for following him. When we look at the graphic that's there, which will be before us for most of these charts, to me that's a visual representation of us. That occurred literally in the first century while he was here on the earth. People walked after him. They followed him. And they walked with him wherever he went. Well, that's what you and I are doing spiritually today. He is in heaven. You are here on the earth. But our discipleship is that of following him, walking in his steps. And if you will, climbing that hill, as we talked about last week, of discipleship. In this passage, in Matthew chapter 16 and verse 24, then said Jesus unto his disciples, those that were with him at this time, if any man would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Well, what we have in that verse that motivates, he expresses what he expects of us. Its expectations motivate. In other words, what he said involves three things. He said, if any man would come after me or be an adherent of mine, is the literal meaning of that language, let him deny himself. Barclay defines this as completely obliterating self, completely removing self from any place of importance and letting the Lord and others have that place in your heart. It also includes taking up our cross. In Luke chapter 9, verse 23, Jesus said daily. So when he talks about that, we know that what he means and his expectation is for you and me to bear whatever sacrifice it takes on our part, at home, at work, or wherever it may be in our social life, to continue to be his disciple. It's just simply a way of life of discipleship every day. And sometimes that sacrifice for some in some parts of the world, and hopefully never for us, involves the ultimate sacrifice of even giving one's own life for him. But then thirdly, it involves following him. Take up his cross and follow me. Walk behind him as Lord every step of the way. That's what the Lord expects. And so I'm motivated by what he expects of me, and I trust that you are. But when we consider these things, they are considered by the world as wasting your life. Anytime that you deny yourself, or you're not focused on self and achievement and doing whatever it takes to advance yourself, then you're wasting your life. That's just the opposite of what the Lord expects. Again, it's against one of man's highest priorities. One of our natural priorities is self-preservation. We do what it takes to preserve ourselves and our loved ones. And so, to sacrifice oneself for others, to put oneself in a position of inconvenience and denial for others, is against one of our highest priorities as human beings. So again, we have to change to meet the Lord's expectation. And then finally, human wisdom avoids these things at all cost. When I think about this point, expectations motivating. Each of us, you and I, can look back on our life and think of many people that have motivated us by their expectations. My mom and dad motivated me by telling me their expectations of me. My grandma did that for me. My mentor in preaching did that for me. In a life of preaching, he taught me things about preaching. He taught me the Bible. He taught me the work of gospel preaching and expressed his expectations of me. He has since passed away, but his expectations motivated me. And so it is with many things in your life as well. So let the Lord's expectations motivate you for your discipleship. Don't turn away from what he expects of you. Use what he expects to lift you up, to give more energy to fulfilling what he wants you to do in discipleship. Well, what we have in the next verse. This is verse 25. Jesus said, "For whoever would save his life shall lose it. And whoever shall lose his life for my sake shall never find it." I know that's a familiar passage. Many can recite that from memory. But what's in there, Jesus intended to motivate us, is what we would call its principle. This is the principle of discipleship. What is that? Well, acceptance of the expectations of discipleship is the only way to avoid self-destruction. Any individual, and most people on the earth are today, by multitudes and masses, say, "I'm going to trust myself. I'm not going to turn away from me and give my life to anyone else. I'm going to continue with my focus on me." Atheistic humanism is so dominant in the world today, and that's what it produces in the mentality of adults and kids, is to make self the center of the universe, and everything revolves around you. If that is pursued, a rejection of the expectations of discipleship, one is headed for self-destruction. Rather than saving oneself, one is destroying oneself. Do we believe that? I believe that by faith. I believe that because I love the Lord, and the Lord has taught me that principle, and He is teaching you that principle as well. Self-rescue and clinging to attain the highest life desired only results in its loss. That's why it's self-destruction. And that's what people do. I'm going to save myself. I'm going to rescue myself. I'm going to cling to me and my own, and that kind of self-centered egotism. To preserve one's life is another way of saying what Jesus said, to find it. That's what He meant. One must surrender, or Jesus said lose it, to Him out of love for Him. This is the only way that any individual can actually preserve themselves, actually in this life and especially in the next. And that is, to preserve one's life, we must give it away. We must surrender it. We must lose it only to one person, and of course our Father through Christ, and that is to surrender to Him out of love for Him. And I would suggest to you, this is the grand paradox of the gospel and our hope of eternal life. This is the principle of discipleship. And if knowing that, and we believe that, and your faith tells you that is true, should really motivate. Okay, I can't be doing what is going to result in my self-destruction or in my loss. No way. Well, that motivates me, and I hope it motivates you. Well, let's look at something else. The Lord continued in verse 26. And He said, "For what shall a man be profited?" And this is perhaps one of the more familiar verses. "If he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" Well, those questions are valid, but they are intended by Him to motivate discipleship. And we note that two questions motivate a willingness by addressing what we can call in everyday life profit-loss. Businesses conduct their business on a profit-loss basis. They try to do what is more profitable than loss. And we do in our family budget. We try to go for the profit rather than the loss, and we try to manage our finances so we're concerned about this principle. Well, it's interesting that the Lord uses this principle in this for a profit-loss question. And so the two questions motivate this willingness by addressing these two issues. Now, meeting the expectations of discipleship means a prophet. That's what he's teaching us. That is the prophet side of this ledger. It means a prophet more valuable than the whole world. Now, I think about this a lot, and I'm sure you have. And I don't know that I can put it in words any different than what you've already thought about. But gaining the whole world would not compensate for the loss of the soul. It's hard to wrap our mind around owning the whole world. If you were handed the deed to every piece of property on the face of the earth, you were the sole owner of the whole world and all of its treasures. You. What the Lord is doing is picturing that. And he's teaching us in this verse in its entirety. Gaining that would not compensate for the loss of your soul. So let me put that another way, if I can. Let's say your soul is saved. You know you're saved and going to heaven. You're going to spend eternity with God. And someone comes along in reality and offers you what I just talked about, the deed to every piece of property on the face of the earth. Again, it's hard to wrap our minds around, but that's what the Lord is talking about. The whole world, I'm going to give this to you. It can be yours. You can be the sole owner of everything upon this planet if you'll just suffer the loss of your soul. Now, if I would ask you, how many of you would make that exchange? I trust that none of you would. Why? Because of what Jesus taught in this passage. For what shall a man be profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his soul? He will not be profited anything. In other words, he'll suffer loss. Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? In other words, you'll not give anything, even the whole world, for the salvation of your soul. And if the salvation of your soul is that important, I suggest to you that that's a motivation to you. Because the only way that that profit can be realized in your life is by you following Jesus in discipleship. So he teaches us motivation by showing it is a matter of profit. Profit that is greater than we can ever imagine. But he pictures it in such a way as to make a comparative to help us understand. We wouldn't trade it for anything, even everything. I'm going to mention a couple things about your soul. Sometimes folks have questions about this. And the Lord is talking about our soul in this passage. If he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul. So let's talk about some things to keep in mind about that. Sometimes people ask, what is my soul? What does the Bible mean when it talks about my soul? Well, let's mention some things that we can know by faith because they're taught in the Bible, and I will show you where these things are taught. First of all, I would suggest to you that your soul is immortal. That means it will live forever. It will never die. From the moment you're born and have a soul, your soul is in existence forever. It is immortal. You remember, as Matthew recorded in chapter 10, verse 28, the Lord said this. He said, be not afraid of them that kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. But rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. We realize that in this day and age, a lot of people are being shot, murdered, killed. And the Lord is not teaching that it's wrong for us to fear that kind of thing, but he's making a comparison that we should not allow that fear to dominate us. But what his point is in the first part of this verse, don't be afraid of individuals that come along with a gun and can shoot us, or animals. A spider that's hardly the size you can see, can kill you with its venom. So a lot of things, both man and animal, can take our physical life. But none of them, not a one of them, is able to kill the soul. The soul cannot be killed. But rather fear him who is able to destroy. That does not mean take it out of existence, both soul and body, and that word there is Gehenna. You will have a soul and body, a resurrection body, not this physical body, but a resurrection body that is adapted to the next life in Gehenna. That's everlasting, eternal hell fire. And that's what the Lord mentioned in this passage. Let's fear God who is able to do that. Well, let me mention another thing. Your soul possesses faculties. What do I mean by that? Well, you possess faculties, but really it is your soul that possesses faculties. Let me show you the Lord teaching this principle. In Matthew chapter 22 and verse 37, he said unto him, that is the individual to whom he was speaking, thou shalt love the Lord thy God. In other words, this is that conversation on the greatest commandment. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. In other words, the Lord is teaching that your soul has the faculty of loving. Because in this passage, he is teaching us that we're to love God with all of it. As we measure our love for God, we're to be growing in capacity so that we can be said that with all of our heart, our emotional part, with all of our mind, our intellectual part, and with all of our soul, our spiritual part, that inward man, all of it, we're to love God. So that soul has the capacity to love. Well, let's look at something else. And when you look at this, again, a familiar principle, what's going to happen to it? God gave it to you at birth. And so we have it during this physical life. But what's going to happen? If it lives forever, it returns to God. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 7, a Bible principle, in the wisdom of Solomon, he made this familiar statement, then the dust shall return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. That's explicit. What's going to happen? Well, the Old Testament, of course, uses the term spirit and soul interchangeably, and so does the New Testament. So when it talks about the spirit, it's talking about the inward man that we identify as the soul. But what he said about it in this passage, it will return to God. That's where it goes, to God. But why? Because God gave it. And so our soul is immortal. Our faculties are immortal, that are possessed in the soul. And upon our death, when the dust is returning to the dust, the soul will return to God. Now, this one last point I regard as being important. Your soul is your own real self. Now, wait a minute. I'm not sure about that. Okay, let's think about that. Most of us think we get up in the morning and we look in the mirror and what we see is our real self. We may not have combed our hair yet or any of those things, but we're looking at him or her. That's our real self. No, it's not. That's not your real self. What do we mean by that? Well, let's read a passage that will shed some light on this. And this is Luke's account of Luke chapter 9, verse 25, where the Lord made a similar statement, but he used a different wording to help us understand a little bit about what he means when he talks about our soul. He said, for what is a man profited if he gained the whole world? Does that sound familiar? Absolutely. And lose or forfeit his, and he didn't say soul here, he said his own self. So what's in counterpart to the flesh is our own self. What is your own self? It's your soul. So in other words, when you look in the mirror and we think that's really me, well, what that is your physical body, of course. There's no denying that. And that is your earthly tabernacle, as Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, the tabernacle that God has given to house the soul while we're here on the earth, to animate, to provide life here on this planet. But the real self, the real you, continues on, living forever. That motivates, because we're going to spend that eternity somewhere, and it's going to be entirely up to God when the Spirit returns to Him. But we have one more thing we want to notice. That is, this motivation for discipleship includes verse 27. For the Son of Man, he said, shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels. And then shall he render unto every man according to his deeds. It's very clear what the Lord is talking about there. He's talking about something about discipleship that is taught elsewhere in the New Testament, of course, but it's a very strong motivation, and that is its judgment. These people that's following him up that hill in that graphic, he would turn to them to say, you need to hang in there. You need to be motivated. You need to walk as close to me as you can. And let me tell you why. Because one day, I'm going to judge you. I'm going to pass judgment on you. Because the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of God, and he shall render unto every man according to his works, whether he's been a disciple, how faithful is the disciple, or not at all. That will happen. That's a motivation. And so we look at this and know that we do not rely upon the world for receiving reward for life we've lived. If I would say to you as a worker on your job that you do to make a living, that job is going to reward you for eternity. Man, you're crazy. No way. I would never even... No one thinks that. We know that nothing on this earth, material and physical in nature, our best jobs, our best lives, there's nothing on this earth that we can depend upon to reward us for the next life, the life that we've lived here on the earth. The one to whom your discipleship belongs will come. That is, discipleship belongs to him. He is the one that will come and reward you according to your doings. On this great day of judgment, one's reward for faithful discipleship will be fully realized. The Lord talks about this quite often during his earthly ministry, and he does so in different ways. And he teaches us to watch and pray, to be ready, for in an hour that we know not he will come. But when he talks about discipleship in this passage, in this keynote passage on discipleship, he motivates us not only by talking about his expectations, the principle, the prophet, but by the fact that he, one day, will judge us the way that we have lived. So when we look at what we have covered so far in this lesson, we are down to the end of it. Motivation for discipleship is motivated by its expectations, its principle, that paradoxical thing, you have to give it up to have the best, and its profit and its judgment. All of those are individual words that represent so much of what the Lord taught. The motivation for discipleship is the motivation for becoming a Christian. When you think about what the Lord said to those who were his disciples, motivating discipleship, he's not just talking to those who are already his disciples, but he's motivating those who aren't to become disciples. So this is the motivation for becoming a Christian. Jesus expects, that expectation there, that motivation again, you to become a disciple. He has that expectation of everyone. He wants you to become his disciple. He wants you to become a Christian. He wants you to become a child of God. He expects that. Now, that should motivate us to become one. But it must be done on his terms. His terms are found only in his teaching, the gospel of Christ, or the New Testament. His terms are easily understood by everyone. People of all ages who are old enough to read and understand, once the age of accountability is reached, even the youngest can understand what the Lord is commanding. That we must believe in him, and that faith will bring us to render the obedience that he requires of us, to be united with him in his death, burial, and resurrection, to be baptized into him as taught in Galatians chapter 3, verses 26 and 27. We encourage those who are hearing this lesson, both at home by live stream and in person, to be motivated for discipleship. That's our whole purpose here. And in that motivation, have interest, and allow that motivation to fuel your interest, and then allow that increased interest to make you more motivated, and more motivated your interest. And so that has a way of working, and that's the way it works. We all know that. So it's a matter of us having the character and having the faith that is strong enough, with a desire. So many other factors enter in that we want to go to heaven. We urge you to render the obedience that will help you become a Christian. And any who are not here but at home watching by your device over live stream desire help in understanding what the Bible teaches, we're here to help you in whatever way we can.